now I'm recording the sound as well. Okay. Okay. Now we can start.
Good.
Thank you very much for taking your time. My research is focusing on how German company Stihl treats its workers. And in Germany, I hear only good things about the working conditions, but now I'm interested, how is the situation in foreign countries? The company Sama is owned by Stihl. What do you know about the working conditions at Sama?
Well, the working conditions at Zama, there have been several strikes at Zama that don't bode too well for the working conditions there at Zama in Shenzhen. So there was a strike in 2017, and that was the latest of several strikes. There was at least 3 strikes reported over the course of 4 years prior to that strike in 2017. The biggest one being in 2013, where almost 1,000 temporary workers at Zama went on strike. So basically, this was one of, in my time at China Labor Bulletin, an NGO in Hong Kong that monitors labor rights in the mainland. This was one of the more dramatic strikes that I witnessed during my several years working there. So I think, as far as I understand, the German management was involved and very concerned about the workers' demands. But it's I've seen many different labor conflicts and many different worker strikes and protests during my time at China Labor Bulletin, thousands in fact, and this was one of the more dramatic. So there's reason to believe that the workers at Zama have had very long-standing grievances that have been consistently not solved by management or not solved sufficiently.
Okay. So what were the main problems? Why did the workers feel the need to strike?
Well, there were many reasons why workers went on strike. In fact, I mean the most there's one particular story. A worker I had talked to personally during the 2017 strike was actually striking for a very specific reason that was slightly different from the rest of his peers. For him, Mr. Wang, he said that his job was particularly unsafe. His job was involved in some painting, spraying paint. He basically done this similar job to other factories throughout the Pearl River Delta over the years, but I found that at this particular factory the conditions were particularly unsafe, and he said that he didn't even have a face mask for the work and wasn't provided with basic safety equipment for his job and was complaining of headaches. So he basically that this was one of the more dangerous jobs that he'd ever worked at, and he brought these concerns to management, and he and his colleagues organized to bring their concerns to management, and they were just one of many, what turned out to be hundreds of workers that were bringing all sorts of different demands to management in 2017 that turned into a strike.
Okay, so what were the demands of the workers?
Well, most of them were started because of rumors that the company was going to relocate to a city nearby. And so what that did, when there were rumors of relocation, basically that caused all different workers from all different factory lines to basically settle unsolved scores with management. So they've all had long-standing grievances over pay or over work safety or over benefits that all came to a head when the management had basically released plans to relocate. As far as we understand it, as workers heard rumors that there were going to be relocation plans. And over several months, basically workers had organized amongst themselves and brought their demands to management, assembled their unsettled scores and sat down with management for rounds of negotiation. And they were basically unsatisfied with the outcome of that process, and that forced them in the end to go on strike for several days. And eventually the police were called onto the scene. Workers say that management were the ones who called the police. And when the police did come, they had dogs. There were conflicts with the police. It was one of the more violent and dramatic police encounters with workers on strike that I've seen when I was during my time at China Labor Bulletin. It was quite dramatic.
Okay. Maybe you already talked a little bit about it, but maybe you can just say again, were there any safety issues or health issues at Zama?
Yeah, absolutely. According to the worker that I talked to, Mr. Wang, this was one of the more unsafe jobs in a very unsafe industry. There's safety violations all over all different kinds of factories, the Pearl River Delta, and workers that do dangerous work know what they're getting into, but they have basic rights under Chinese law. Chinese work safety law is actually very stringent and demands that workers have. It requires that workers have proper safety equipment for dangerous jobs. But at this particular job, Mr. Wang had one worker that I interviewed had said that he didn't even have the basic very basic safety precautions that he had at other factories, like a face mask to protect himself from the poisonous fumes that he was using in his spraying and painting job. So no mask, no gloves, no safety equipment, and there were other things like subsidies. Sometimes workers in dangerous jobs get special subsidies, and he didn't have anything like that in this particular factory, according to him. And so he had headaches and other occupational illnesses that his coworkers were suffering, which caused a major labor dispute.
Mm-hmm. There was one strike in July 2017, but I think this was not the first strike. Do you know how many strikes happened there?
As far as we know, there was a big strike in 2017, which is the one we monitored closely. But before that, there were at least 3 strikes in the span of 4 years at Zama. The biggest one in 2013, where 1,000 temporary workers went on strike. Temporary workers are a way for management basically to get around paying workers, full pay and benefits that are given to full-time employees. So throughout China and throughout the world, there's a lot of times tension between lower paid workers, temporary workers with lower benefits, who end up essentially doing the same exact work as full-time employees, but for less pay and fewer benefits. And so workers, 1,000 temporary workers went on strike at Zama and had attempted to negotiate with management, and the police also showed up in that 2013 strike as well. So there's several strikes, at least 3 within the span of 4 years, from 2017 to 2013.
Okay. Do you have any information? How is the situation there today?
No, we don't have any update on the situation or whether the factory did in fact move that base since the strike in 2017.
Okay. Can you just talk a little bit about your work? So you were reporting for China Labor Bulletin, and what are you doing now?
So I worked at China Labor Bulletin, which is a labor rights NGO in Hong Kong from 2015 to around 2018, early 2018, so 3 years there. I worked on the strike map, which is a record of all worker strikes, or not all workers, but a selection of worker strikes and protests that happen daily throughout China every single day. And I think I personally reported about 5,000 worker strikes and protests within the span of a couple of years that I was working on that strike map. So that these worker strikes and protests are extremely common in China. Now I've since switched to working as a reporter. I'm now a journalist. I work at the South China Morning Post, which is a Hong Kong-based newspaper, and I am now the Beijing correspondent for the South China Morning Post. I mostly do diplomacy work, not so much internal politics stuff, but China's relationship with other countries around the world.
And what is your nationality?
Sorry, that was kind of the connection was bad. Could you ask that one again?
Okay. What what is your nationality? Do you come from Hong Kong or
Nationality? Oh, I'm
nationality?
originally from the USA. Yeah, I'm originally from the USA. I haven't lived there in a long time, but I'm originally from the US.
Okay. So Stihl is a very big company. They are the world leader for manufacturing chainsaws. So, are you disappointed by the company Stihl, or do you have any demands or questions for the German company Stihl?
One of the things that was interesting about the Steel case was that German companies, as a lot of other major European and U.S. companies do, they sign very principled and stringent agreements and pledges that commit themselves to high principles like collective bargaining or good work environment, safe and hygienic work environment. And a lot of times companies really fall behind in keeping up to these standards. I mean, I think that companies have the best intentions when they sign these agreements, but it's very difficult for them. We've found in case after case, Chandler Books and other people who monitor this sort of thing, for them to actually implement these things on the ground. And really Steel is not alone, unfortunately, in their real failure to stand up to the agreements that they've signed. In the case of Steel, in 2015, Steel signed a code of conduct with its suppliers as part of the UN Global Compact, and that if his testimony is correct, the company was in grave violation of its commitments to the code of conduct that it signed with the UN Global Compact. But this isn't uncommon, and one of the major problems is that I think workers around the world are perfectly capable of calling out rights abuses because it's their own interests that are affected. So in the most part, what's missing to join those high principles that a company signs with the UN or some global body, with the realization of those principles at the bottom of the supply chain and the real grassroots, is basically power in the hands of workers themselves to monitor and implement these particular principles, which means collective bargaining. It means allowing workers to organize and to regularly monitor their own rights and working conditions, and make sure that they have constant dialogue with management and the ability to put down their tools, even strike if necessary, to make sure that their rights are defended. So that's one way that a big multinational like Steel or anybody else who signs these global compacts and is serious about them can be serious about allowing their workers to have more rights to self-organization on the factory floor. That's really the only way that those rights can be realized and not just remain a sheet of paper that remains in a drawer somewhere in Steel headquarters.
Okay. So these were basically my questions. Do you have anything else that you want to add?
No, not really. I think there were, at the time on social media, a lot of workers at the factory were sharing pictures and conversations, which you can still find on social media, records of the conflict itself. Workers were really upset, in particular. Management should be aware, and conflict on their own factory floor escalates to the point where they have use pepper spray. The workers were really upset, and police were using pepper spray on the workers to repress their labor action. This is it was clear that Steel was trying their best to intervene, but by that time it was obviously too late. So there's the real question at hand is what kind of labor relations changes could be made or should have been made, to prevent this sort of a conflict. I mean, with the 2017 incident, police and pepper spraying dogs aside, there's a very well documented previous strike. In 2013, there was another strike. That should have been a warning flag, to management that they had some very deep labor relations issues at their supplier. It should never have happened again. The issue should have been solved long ago. So, regardless of how Steel managed their 2017 incident, there are several incidents that should have been handled properly when the conflict occurred.
Okay. So thank you very much. Could you do one favor for me, because later I have to sync the audio recording and the video recording. So if you could do just one clap, that would help me.
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Yes, okay. There's a big shift between video and audio right now. But now I should be able to synchronize it. Okay, so thank you very much for taking your time.
Yeah, no problem. Yep.
Thank you. Bye.